Welcome back, scholars. It's Doc, and I'm here with another screencast tutorial for you. This week, our topic is speech making by design, or approaches to outlining and note taking. Now, our last tutorial on introduction and conclusions gave us some nice tips on how to structure our speech beginnings and endings. In the informative speech patterns video, it helped us to figure out some ways to organize the body of our speeches. But what does this look like on the page? And how is this going to translate on the stage? Well, that's what today's tutorial is going to walk us through. Ways to organize our thoughts on the page. Or another way to say this is how to approach note-taking and outlining. Most of us have been taking notes our entire educational career in some way, shape, or form. However, whenever I ask my students to give me an outline, I always get 27 different variations of an outline. Some with lists, other with bullet points, Roman numerals, dashes, weird tab indentations, and awkward margins that look like badly laid out grids, almost like city streets where nothing ever really comes together and connects. And this used to really annoy me. Just block it like this, I'd think, because that's how I'd been trained to do it. And also because that's how it made sense to me. But after 15 years of teaching communication classes on the higher education level, I can tell you that my way of outlining doesn't always make sense for everyone. Some students are more visual learners, others more linear thinkers. Some prefer sheets of printer paper to start with rather than lines. Others create columns that categorize their thoughts. What I learned from these observations is that the page is a blank canvas, and we as creators of messages have the privilege of designing whatever goes on that canvas. This had me encouraging students to think less about writing your speech and more about designing your message. Yes, designing. Just like an interior decorator would design a new living room, or a civil engineer might design a new suburb being built, or a coach laying out the next play. We need to visualize what goes where, and then set about placing the correct items, in this case, claims, opinions, evidence, examples, signposting, and put them where we want them to go in the speech. How does that work? Well, let's take a look at our on-the-page process from two perspectives. First, we'll talk about creating notes for a single main point. And then we'll compare that with outlining options for multiple main points. What I hope is that by the end of this tutorial, you are thinking about outlining less like writing a paper for your English class and more like designing an overall performance for your speech class. Let's jump right in with ways to organize your thoughts. Right now, we've been using the Pop-It method as a simple way to structure a single idea. If you've watched any of the daily discussion boards, you know that this has really helped folks to add depth and relevance and significance to their content that they cover in 1 minute. This week marks the 4th week of participating in these daily discussion boards. And during week 1, we witnessed lots of people posting their notes along with their videos. If you go back and scroll through some of these things, you'll notice a few commonalities, like people using the Pop-It acronym as a way to organize and label their thoughts, or the majority of people actually writing complete sentences and fully spelling out what they want to say. And those who did spell out every sentence and every word typically read more than they actually talked on their video presentations. No judgment, just an observation. All of these are commonalities because they work. But if we go back to our interior design metaphor for a moment, this approach to note-taking for a presentation or speech is kind of like placing the wrong piece of furniture in a room. It doesn't quite fit. The methods and practices that make you feel confident when writing your English class essays can actually become real challenges to the development of your overall speaking performance. When we write something really amazing on the page, We tend to want to depend on it and use it as a crutch rather than as a launching pad. Is there a place for manuscripted speeches? Yes, absolutely there is. But those manuscripts might not look like a typical typed academic essay. Once we can begin to think about the development of our speeches less like writing an essay and more like mapping our message, then we can start stepping into our true performance power as public speakers. Okay, so what things should we change so that we can still tap into the strengths of our writing techniques, but without them becoming barriers to our success? Well, for one main point, definitely use the pop-it method. The acronym method is great, but avoid complete sentences. Instead, use short phrases or words to trigger what you want to say rather than spelling it all out. We're smart people. If you see a short phrase and you already thought about what you want to say, then you'll make the connection between the two ideas. Also, you should use a note card or a piece of scratch paper to help you kind of create limited space. And that will remind you that you're not writing an essay. The limited amount of space will force you to discipline your thoughts by creating clear labels and taglines for each idea. Here's an example of how a half sheet of paper can be used as a template for taking notes. Notice how on the column edge there, I've just labeled each part of the pop-it, but I leave enough space on the rest of the page where I can sketch in quickly and on the go what I would like to say in that area. Now, multiple main points might take you a little bit of time to sort through. This is where learning about how our speech patterns work will really help to save you on time and tap into your own creative design juices. For multiple main points, there are a few things you might want to pay attention to. First, instead of using a note card or a piece of scratch paper, you'll want to sketch out a manuscript. But use the speech patterns as your structural guide. Specify important parts of the speech content. Use Roman numerals and bullet points and other markers to help highlight parts of the speech. Can you have complete sentences? Sure, but do not write an essay. Your eyes are going to need to be able to visually see where everything is on the page, especially if you use it during your presentation. So bullet point, label, highlight, use various types of font and colors. Have fun with creating a map for your message. So let's talk for a moment about the steps that lead up to your final outline, because you're not just going to immediately open up, or my hope is that you don't just immediately open up a Word document and say go. If that's your method, I respect that. But at the same time, I'm a little bit old school. So a piece of paper, pen, paper, I like colored pencils and colored paper and colored pens, whatever you need if you need to sketch out some ideas. In fact, that's the first step, storming. Brainstorming ideas is a great way for you to generate themes, generate topics, identify major kind of ideas and connections between ideas that you could possibly use within your speech. During the storming stage, anything and everything counts. Your ultimate goal is to generate ideas. Please don't censor yourself during this process. Everything counts, everything goes on the page. And you want to try and fill up the page as much as possible so that when you go back through and sort through the ideas, you've given yourself enough content to be able to figure out where you want to go in your speech. I'm a storming kind of girl. I like to brainstorm, but maybe you're a little bit more linear. So listing might be a better option for you. Just making a list, 15, 20, 30 things that could possibly be turned into major topics or major themes within your speech could help you organize your thoughts. Now, once you have created your brainstorm or your list, you now have something that you can start to sort through, which is the next step. Trying to figure out what major themes connect each one of those ideas so that you have a place to focus your overall content. Once you have a nice group or list, you can now sort them into major themes. Basically, put things that are similar into groups and then start to label them. Very easily, you should be able to see many topics start to formulate between your examples. Now, this is how I could organize my brainstorm into themes. My topic is outlining. For the first topic, I could see a visual map for speech. There are several examples that led to a visual map for speech. The second kind of label I could use is a key for what to say, when, and how. So thinking about our script as a key or a map for what to say, when, and how. And then number three, that there's more than one right way to do things. And so just to remind us in this process that everybody's outline is not necessarily going to look the same, but there are multiple different ways to reach the learning outcome that we're all aiming to achieve. I could break my brainstorm into those three themes and categorize them in that way. After thematizing everything and putting them into loosely labeled themes, here's where using speech patterns will help you to figure out how you want to design your speech. Our informative speech patterns tutorial covered 4 specific methods: topical order, chronological order, sequential order, and spatial order. And we're going to take a little bit of time to actually unpack those in a few moments. But I want to point you to topical order specifically because I think these themes already gave me 3 topics that I could use as the body of my speech. Topical order is something that is super popular. We do this almost subconsciously. We automatically kind of categorically place things that are similar within one kind of theme or within one kind of topic. So for instance, if you are going to do a speech on sports, your topics might be basketball, hockey, soccer, rugby, football, baseball. If you wanted to do a speech on tech companies, your 4 main points could be Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, and Google. Right? These are topics that you could unpack that are related to one another under an umbrella idea, but each have their own separate kind of claims and separate type of information that could help to educate your audience. Now, I mentioned before that this is a very popular method that people use to organize their thoughts, that we do this almost subconsciously, but it's not the only way. And for this next part of the presentation, I want to help us visualize the different speech patterns to really help you think about how you want to organize and design your concept demonstration speeches. So before I start to show you my examples, a little backstory. I used to do this assignment when I taught oral communication at Southwestern College, where students had to create visual memes representing each speech pattern. This was a really awesome assignment. Just because even though students understood conceptually what sequential order was or what chronological order was, it really helped them to kind of figure out symbolically and visually what this looked like. And I think that it became a great foundation for creating solid, in-depth, relevant, significant speeches later on. So let's take a look at a few of these and talk about how these visual speech patterns become templates that help to design what could be said in your speeches. So here's example number 1. I really appreciated how this student, Lexis, also gave us a little definition. So it helps to set the tone for us. Chronological order. Now, chronos in Greek means time. So anytime we're talking about chronological order, we're talking specifically about time as our way to organize our ideas. I love how in this example here, it points to time in terms of each decade: 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. You can talk about what happens in each of those decades in terms of the development of human life, if that's what you wanted to focus your speech on and how you wanted to organize it. Chronological order can also be related to seasons. So you could talk about things seasonally: what happens in spring, what happens in summer, what happens in winter, what happens in fall. And so you can get a seasonal pattern and understand how time operates across seasons. I love how this student pointed out that even time during the day is a way that you can order your ideas. So if you were relaxing on an awesome beach in Costa Rica, what would it look like? I'm a little jealous that she was out in Costa Rica relaxing. And then it looks like she got a little slushy. And then she did a little bit of scuba diving or swimming before finally having a beautiful sunset and closing out the night. I also think that this student here, Angel, did a really good job of showing how time can be ordered by events, and so what happens in terms of the order of the events itself or the stages of the events. So in this case, in the upper corner, you see a boat being built, a ship being built, and it's under construction. And then if you look in the other corner, you see the fireworks going off, a celebration of that construction being completed. And then it takes you to the bottom corner and you see the color line sifting out into the ocean as it sets sail to do what it was made to do. And then it crashed, just like the Titanic, tragically in the middle of the ocean. And so chronological order could tell a story in terms of the way that the events unfolded and the order in which the events unfolded. Chronological order also gets confused a lot with sequential order. And this is because both of them are dealing with kind of like a time, if you will, but sequential order deals less with time and more with steps in a process. So, how to do something, how to make something, how to create something. This pattern involves a step by step process where one thing leads to another, a sequence of events that helps to establish the process and lead to a particular outcome. So in this picture, I love this one because I'm a foodie, and two, I like to think of myself as being a master chef. But you can see that everything is laid out so nicely and that there will be an order to how things will be done in this particular kitchen. Recipes lend themselves really nicely to sequential order. When you think about how to make bread and the steps to making bread, you can easily order the process by steps. Again, Paulina coming back with these wonderful travel pictures in the sequential order, how to eat tropical fruit in a treehouse. Sequential order also can be thought about in terms of value and worth. I love how this student was very creative in creating sequential order with money, from the penny to the nickel to the dime to a quarter and looks like a $50. And those are placed in sequential order. And that order is in order of increasing value. I love this one as well in terms of the sequence of life. And so if you thought about the stages of a person's life and put them into sequential order, you can see how it would make sense to help show kind of the process of growth or the process of lives. And initially, when I received this submission, I thought about this as being 4 generations of men in a single family. But then later, when I was actually helping to put this presentation together, I thought, oh, wow, it could be just one individual over a lifetime. Right? But either way, both representations symbolically work. And so this should help us to kind of figure out how to represent visually sequential order on the page. Spatial order is perhaps my favorite order of all 4 informative speech patterns. I say this just because I love to think about the way that we design space, the way that we place things, and what the relationship is between items. And that's exactly what this pattern emphasizes, how things are physically related to one another in a specifically defined area or space. Spatial order is something that you can really have a lot of fun with. I love how this person thought about the best way to make a burger, or how it looks like this could be In-N-Out. Well, actually, it might not be In-N-Out because it has bacon, and you know that In-N-Out doesn't. They have 3 items on the menu, old school, traditional. That's why we love them. You know exactly what you're going to get. But going back to this burger, I'm not sure where he got it from, but he was able to help us walk through, listen, here's the correct space that you put the bun, then the bacon, then the cheese, then the meat, then more bacon, then more cheese, then more meat, then lettuce, then onions. And if you like condiments, then you put the condiments, and then don't forget the bottom part of the bun. That's spatial order. We know physically where things are related to one another and in what order. Brilliant. Super, super clever. Oh, I thought this one was really clever too. Chelsea offered us a chance to see 3 different parts of America that formed the whole continent. This was really awesome too. I don't play soccer, but I was able to understand a little bit more about the soccer field and what goes where and who plays where just by looking at the way that this is mapped out for me. And I think that if I were giving a speech, I would be able to actually say, let's first talk about the defensive third. Then we'll talk about the middle third. Then we'll talk about the offensive third. Then we'll talk about the right and the left flank and what happens on each one of those sides. And you see what I'm saying? Right? You can definitely use these visual aids to be able to help you figure out what you want to say and how you want to say it. Now, one thing I want to point out, and I think that this meme here does a really good job of visually putting this on display, is that none of these patterns are mutually exclusive. Yes, you can focus on one pattern at a time, and it's important that you understand how each pattern works. But you don't have to limit yourself to only one organizational pattern. You can actually combine these so that you can represent and add depth and relevance to your content. So, for instance, what Chris did was really nice. There are 4 different points that he makes in this particular speech. First, he talks about 2011 and being in Chicago. Second, he talks about 2012 and being in San Diego. Third, he talks about 2015 being in Japan. And fourth, he talks about 2016 and being in Spain. The years mark chronological order. The names of the cities or the nations mark the spatial order or location. And then he's also taken time to label kind of US in duty station. So this is where he was stationed while he was in service. And he could possibly topically talk about 2 to 3 different things that he did as a part of his job when he served in these particular locations. So just there, looking at this visual aid of this person's particular speech, I can see 3 different patterns already functioning in his thought process. Now, I also want to point out how one of my students actually did a really nice job of not just creating one meme, but a series of memes that helped to tell her story of what she wanted to talk about. Not only putting on display the pattern, but also laying out kind of what could be talked about in her tutorial. So in this image here, we could imagine that this person is trying to figure out how to get from one place to another. And they know that they want to take the bus or public transportation. And so they're checking that out. After they figured out where they want to go and how they want to get there, the next logical step seems to go and get a ticket. So that would be the next thing that they do. And then after they purchase the ticket, they would get on the bus and end up going off to wherever they're planning on going. So this person marked this as chronological order, but it's also sequential order. So yes, in terms of timing, it might say throughout the day, here's what you would do to be able to get from one place to another. But also it serves as sequential order because it helps to demonstrate a step-by-step process from planning your trip to implementing it. Katya also did a sequential order example using the same storyboard method. And this time it was to bake a cake. So here, the first step would be to mix the batter. The second step would be to pour that batter, hopefully in a buttered or greased pan. The third step would be to bake it. Yes, I know. It went from a square or rectangular pan into a circular pan. Did you see that? I saw that. Did you see that? I'm just saying. I thought that was hilarious. No judgment. You understand the sequence and the steps still. And then the third step would be to put that layered step together. And so she's correct that this is sequential order because it shows the order in which the cake is being made. If she were using these images as her visual aid, she would know exactly what to say about each step and be able to demonstrate the steps to make or bake a cake. So those were a few examples of these awesome memes that I did not make you all create on your own, but I'm super glad that I made my previous classes do that because I think they help us to see how each pattern works in a visual way. And this is one of the key things that I want you to take away from today's conversation. Once you can visualize how the pattern works, you can easily imagine what you want to accomplish. At the beginning of this tutorial, I stated that I wanted you to think less about writing your speech and more about designing your message. After walking you through the different types of note taking that you can use for structuring a single and multiple main ideas, as well as giving you some pretty cool visual examples of how each pattern works, it's now up to you to start developing your own speech making process. Do you have to create visual memes like this? No, not at all. But if a collage helps you to think about what you want to say and how you want to say it, then go for it. Use that collage as a brainstorming process for translating your ideas on the page. Create a visual map that helps you to distinguish each main idea or step or time period or era. You get what I'm saying. And then take that and shape each section one poppet at a time. As you mark each section with short phrases and taglines, you can begin to add depth by including the specific resources and the citations that you research and you want to use as supporting evidence. So, for example, if there's a quotation that you're borrowing from a book, you can literally cut it and paste it into the framework that you use for your poppet under the proof or evidence section. This is where you can begin to see your speech move beyond the surface level stage of identification into a much more sophisticated stage of creation. And in this case, the creation of claims, opinions and explanations, arguments with supporting evidence and impacts, all of that is definitely going to become, hopefully, your concept demonstration speeches. So for your upcoming concept demonstration speeches, I'm asking that you turn in your outline with your video speech. And after today's tutorial, I totally expect that I'm going to get 90 different versions of an outline. And I'm really looking forward to learning what your process was like developing each section. Yes, you'll end up turning in a text document. And yes, it'll probably be 99% text, but hopefully it will reflect your visual flow so that I can see how you are using the page as your guide to your performance on the stage. Okay, scholars, that's it for today. It's been another beautiful chat, and I look forward to you joining me again for our next screencast tutorial. In the meantime, sending you lots of joy and goodness, and I hope you don't get wet because it looks like it's about to rain out there.